The Houston Astrodome was alive that night, a swirling storm of flashing lights, roaring applause, and hearts beating together in restless anticipation. Nearly 17,000 fans had poured into the massive arena, filling every seat, every aisle, and even standing shoulder to shoulder in the back rows. The air itself seemed charged with electricity, the kind that prickled your skin and made your chest vibrate before a single note had been sung. And then the moment arrived. The house lights dimmed. The arena exhaled as one. A hush washed over the crowd like a sudden tide pulling back from the shore. Then, boom! The spotlight snapped to life, cutting a single beam of golden brilliance onto center stage. There he was, Elvis Presley, dressed in his signature white jumpsuit, rhinestones catching the light like shattered stars. He stepped into the glow with a calm, regal presence. The screams thundered, echoing off the domed ceiling. Women shrieked, men shouted his name, teenagers leapt onto their chairs. Yet Elvis, ever the master of moments, simply adjusted the microphone, offered that half smile that made knees buckle, and said, "Good evening, Houston. Y'all ready for a good time tonight?" The roar that followed shook the floor. The TCB band slid into Love Me Tender, the gentle strum of guitars softening the frenzy into reverent stillness. Elvis's voice rose like velvet smoke, smooth yet powerful, and the crowd melted. Couples swayed in each other's arms. Parents held their children close. For a few precious minutes, time itself seemed to bend under the spell of his voice. But Elvis, always aware, always connected, noticed something unusual near the front rows. Among the screaming fans, one man remained utterly still. He wasn't swaying, wasn't singing along, wasn't clapping. He sat rigid, hands clasped on his lap, his eyes fixed not on Elvis but somewhere distant, as if staring through the music. Next to him, a woman sat with her hand gently resting on his. Her lips moved as though whispering encouragement, her eyes glistening with quiet hope. Elvis's sharp instincts caught the contrast immediately, devotion in her face, emptiness in his. He felt the air change around them. The song ended. Thunderous applause rolled like a wave, but Elvis lingered, staring down into that one small pocket of silence in the ocean of noise. He leaned toward the microphone, tilting his head as if to focus the crowd's attention. "Darling, you down? There, you with the kind eyes, would you come up here for a moment?" The audience gasped, heads turning, whispers scattering. Ushers stepped forward to help, but Elvis was already walking down from the stage himself, something he almost never did. The arena held its breath. The woman helped the man to his feet. He moved slowly, hesitantly, his posture stiff, his jaw tight. When the lights hit his face, the crowd noticed the lines etched deep into his skin, the heaviness in his eyes. He was not an ordinary fan. He was a man carrying the weight of unspoken years. As Elvis reached them, he extended his hand with gentle certainty. "Brother, my name's Elvis. What's yours?" The woman answered for him, her voice trembling. "This is Daniel Harper. He hasn't spoken in years." The crowd froze. Elvis blinked, taken aback, but then his expression softened with a compassion that seemed to pour straight from his soul. "Then maybe tonight we'll let the music speak for him," Elvis whispered, loud enough for the microphones to catch. The arena erupted into applause, not for Elvis this time, but for the silent man whose story had just begun to unfold in front of 17,000 witnesses. Before the audience could fully process what was happening, the spotlight shifted, bathing Daniel and his wife Mary in its golden glow. The chatter of 17,000 voices hushed into a reverent silence. Every eye was fixed on the couple as Elvis gently helped them toward the edge of the stage. Mary's voice trembled as she spoke into Elvis's microphone. "He served in Vietnam," she said softly, her words carrying through the arena like fragile glass. "He came home, but he hasn't spoken since." The crowd gasped. Some covered their mouths, others whispered prayers. Veterans in the audience stiffened, recognizing the weight of those words. Daniel stood tall, but his silence spoke louder than any cry. His jaw was clenched, his eyes watery but distant, as though trapped in a place no one else could reach. His hands twitched slightly at his sides, betraying the storm within. Mary continued, her tears glistening in the spotlight. For years, I've waited to hear his voice again. Doctors told us it was trauma, that he could speak if he wanted, but his mind locked the words away. He never says a word. Not to me. Not to our children. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. But he always listened to you, Mr. Presley. Every night your records, sometimes I'd catch him humming just for a second before it disappeared again. That's why I brought him here. I prayed that maybe tonight your voice could reach where mine cannot. The arena was utterly silent, even the cameras capturing. The event seemed to hesitate, as if afraid to intrude. Elvis removed his scarf, the one he had worn on stage, and gently placed it around Daniel's neck. He rested a steady hand on the veteran's shoulder. "Brother," Elvis said, his voice steady, filled with empathy, "I don't know the battles you fought. I don't know the ghosts that follow you. But I know this. You're not alone tonight. Not in this place, not with us." The audience erupted into applause, many already wiping tears from their eyes. Some veterans stood and saluted Daniel. Others simply wept, seeing in him a mirror of their own silent suffering. Mary turned to Daniel, her voice breaking. "Please, I'd just try. Let the music carry you. Let him help you." Daniel's eyes glistened, and for the briefest of moments he looked at Elvis, not through him, but at him. It was as though a crack had appeared in the wall of silence that had held him prisoner for nearly a decade. Elvis nodded to the band, signaling them to prepare. He turned back to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly, "sometimes music is more than notes and words. Sometimes it's the key to a locked soul. Tonight, let's see if we can turn that key." The lights dimmed further, leaving Daniel, Mary, and Elvis in a soft circle of light. The rest of the arena seemed to disappear. It was no longer just a concert. It was a sacred moment. And with that, the stage was set for the turning point. The band shifted into silence as Elvis lifted his hand. The arena lights dimmed to a faint amber glow, leaving only a single spotlight fixed on him, Mary, and Daniel. Every heartbeat in the audience seemed to thrum in unison, waiting for what would come next. Elvis took a deep breath, the microphone trembling slightly in his hand. He looked at Daniel, not as a star to a fan, but as a man to another man, soul to soul. "Boys," Elvis whispered over his shoulder to the band, "give me something gentle, something with a prayer in it." The first soft chords of Bridge Over Troubled Water floated into the air. The melody washed through the arena like a tide, hushed and holy. Elvis knelt in front of Daniel, so close he could see the lines of battle etched into the veteran's face. He held the microphone not for himself, but between them. Then he began to sing. "When you're weary, so feeling small," the words vibrated through the vast arena, yet they were meant for one man alone. Daniel's eyes flickered, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Mary clutched his hand tightly. "Listen, honey," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Just listen to him." Elvis's voice swelled, rich and tender, trembling with emotion. "When tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all." He reached out, gently covering Daniel's hand with his own. The silence in the arena was absolute. 17,000 people leaned forward, as if willing Daniel to break free, and then it happened. Daniel's lips parted. At first, nothing came. His throat worked, his chest heaved, and a faint rasp slipped into the microphone. Barely audible, but there. The crowd gasped. Elvis's eyes widened, and then softened, shimmering, with tears. He nodded encouragingly. Like a bridge over troubled water. The words cracked, broken, but unmistakable. For the first time in nearly a decade, Daniel Harper spoke. The audience exploded into sobs and gasps. Some clasped their hands to their mouths, others openly wept. Veterans stood and saluted, tears streaming down their faces. Mothers hugged their children tighter. Elvis leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching Daniel's. He kept singing, urging him on, his velvet tone wrapping around the veteran's raw, fragile voice like a lifeline. Together they formed a duet no one could have ever scripted. The king of rock and roll and a broken soldier, piecing himself back together through song. By the time they reached the chorus, Daniel was singing, weakly, unevenly, but singing. His voice was no longer trapped in silence. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. The sound filled the arena, and 17,000 people cried as one. The arena was no longer just a concert hall. It had become a cathedral of silence, reverence, and hope. Every light in the Houston Astrodome seemed to bend toward the two men standing together, Elvis Presley, gripping his microphone with steady hands, and Daniel Harper, a veteran whose voice had been trapped in silence for nearly a decade. Elvis slid an arm gently around Daniel's shoulders, grounding him like an anchor. He turned toward the band and lifted his hand. "Soft, boys," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "This one isn't for the record. This one's for him." The musicians obeyed instantly. The piano trickled into a tender river of notes, followed by the faint hum of strings. It wasn't grand, it wasn't polished. It was fragile, intimate, trembling, just like Daniel himself. Elvis raised the microphone, leaned close to Daniel, and began, "When you're down and out, when you're on the street." His voice carried like balm across the crowd, rich yet vulnerable. Daniel's lips trembled, his chest rose. And then, like a door finally creaking open after years of being locked, the words came, "When evening falls so hard, I will comfort you." Gasps rippled across the audience. Women clutched their hearts. Men pressed their hands to their mouths. Veterans in the crowd saluted through their tears. Elvis's knees buckled slightly as he absorbed the moment, but he held steady. He whispered, "That's it, brother. Don't stop now. Sing it with me." Together, their voices blended. One velvet smooth, the other cracked and raw, yet no less powerful. The duet was imperfect, but that imperfection made it divine. It wasn't just a song anymore, it was healing incarnate, a sacred prayer lifted into the rafters of the dome, like a bridge over troubled water. The sound swelled. Audience. Members who had come to scream for rock and roll now found themselves crying as if they were in church. Some hugged strangers. Others dropped to their knees. When the final chorus arrived, Elvis lifted Daniel's arm high into the air like a champion returning from battle. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis cried, voice cracking, "this man has given us the greatest gift of the night. His voice." The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, 17,000 people screaming, sobbing, stamping their feet, united in a tidal wave of sound that shook the stadium. And through it all, Daniel kept singing, his voice no longer broken but reborn. The ovation did not end when Elvis and Daniel left the stage. It followed them down the corridor, through the concrete walls of the Houston Astrodome, echoing like a heartbeat that would never fade. For nearly 10 minutes, 17,000 people remained, on their feet, clapping, crying, shouting the veteran's name as though he were the headliner. Backstage, Daniel sat trembling, still clutching the scarf Elvis had draped over his shoulders. His wife Mary knelt beside him, her tears falling freely, not from sadness but from the miracle she had just witnessed. She whispered, "I can hear your voice again. Do you know what this means?" Daniel swallowed hard. His throat ached. His lips were raw, but he managed to speak in broken whispers. "It means I'm alive." For Elvis, it was more than just another performance. In his dressing room, he told his closest friends, "You saw it, didn't you? That man didn't just sing. He came back. Music pulled him out of the dark. I'll never forget that." News traveled fast. By the next morning, headlines blared across the country. "The night a veteran found his voice with Elvis. Presley concert becomes miracle in Houston." Television anchors spoke with tears in their eyes as they replayed, shaky fan recordings of Daniel's voice trembling alongside Elvis's golden tones. Veterans organizations began writing letters to Graceland, thanking Elvis for honoring their struggle in such a powerful way. For Daniel, that night marked a rebirth. At first, he spoke only in fragments, shy and uncertain. But within weeks, he was talking with Mary every morning at breakfast, something she thought she had lost forever. Soon he was telling stories to his children, then later standing before small veterans groups, sharing how Elvis had helped him cross his own bridge over troubled water. Mary said, "That night gave me my husband back. Not the soldier lost. in silence, but the man I fell in love with. Elvis didn't just change his life, he gave our family hope. Years later, when Elvis passed away, Daniel and Mary traveled to Graceland. Standing among the crowd of mourners, Daniel whispered to a stranger, "He once gave me my voice, tonight I sing for him." Even decades later, people still speak of the Veterans song, not as a performance, but as a moment when music proved its power to heal. Fans tell the story to their children and grandchildren, the night Elvis stopped being just an entertainer and became something more, a bridge between pain and peace, silence and sound, despair and hope. Elvis himself once reflected in a rare, private moment. "They call me the king, but that night, the real king was Daniel. He fought a war, he lost his voice, and he found it again through courage. I just gave him the microphone." And so, in the grand legacy of Elvis Presley, nestled among gold records, sold-out tours and unforgettable hits, there remains this one timeless story. The night a soldier's silence was broken, the night 17,000 people cried as one, the night music healed what war had stolen, forever remembered as the Veterans' Song.